So moving on with the Cooper body from scratch I've been working on. I think it's a T51 from 1959. Um, what I've done so far is I've made this body, and you saw how I made it. And right now there's some pictures flashing by showing you the various construction stages. And it was made using foam, in case you're checking in on this for the first time. It was made out of foam and bulkheads I made off of plans for this car. And after I shaped the foam and put fiberglass cloth over it, I think I used 1/2 ounce in West Systems epoxy. Then I went through several passes of primer in red putty. Now it's the Air Cure putty from Bondo, the red putty, which really does a good job. So we've got the basic body shape, and it's very even and very straight, and everything's fine on it. But what I do next is I'm going to make a mold on this before I go any further in silicone. And from the silicone, I'm going to cast a solid resin master. And I'm going to take that master and I'm going to increase the indentations along here and perfect them. And then I'm going to put in the scribe lines on the body. I'm going to put in the cover for the intakes. I'm going to put in the opening for the exhaust. And all those little details. Yes, before the dogs barked, yes, I'm going to put in all the details in because it's so much easier because this has fiberglass cloth and epoxy resin. It has an Evercoat metal glaze filler on it, which is another, it's a 2-part glazing putty that I use. You can also use the Bondo glazing putty, works really good. That's a harder substance. And then I use the Bondo spot putty, the red spot putty, which is Air Cure. So if you try to scribe this and preen this up more and indent this more, you're going to cut through that stuff, maybe even through the glass and hit the foam again. So you want something that's out of a solid, consistent material, and resin will be it. Now I use a 2-part resin, which is a TC, I'm drawing a blank on the name, but I will show it to you in this video. So anyway, 2-part polyurethane hard resin, and we're going to pour it up solid and then shape this and tool this. So I'm going to make the mold next, which is a pretty easy thing to do. I just have to put a razor on the bottom of this, right around this edge, because you have to be able to have access into there to put your frame. And I'm going to raise it up about that high, and I'm going to build a styrene box around it and pour it full of silicone. And that's the next step. So here I got the little clay wall, clay riser that the whole thing's sitting on, and this is right to the very edge of where you would put your frame in, so it's open. So we can just pour resin in there and slosh it all around. It's still smoothing off a little bit of the clay there, but it's not really that important because this is what we call a waste mold. This is so I have a mold of the first pass on the master, and then again, from this, I'll make a nice resin casting, scribe it up, make it all perfect, and then make a new mold the same way, and that'll be the production mold. So I'm going to take some of this clay and build a wall around it. And the thing about this clay is you can't just use any old modeling clay when you're making molds, if you're doing silicone molds, because if there's any sulfur in the clay, it will react, and your silicone at the surface will be all nasty, and you'll lose all your detail, and you won't have a very good mold. So be sure to use something that is paraffin wax base, or this Chavant modeling clay works perfectly. It's made for sculpting and pouring silicone directly against. In fact, I'm going to be using this clay right here, which is really nasty and green and not really good for sculpting, but it's cheap, and you get a big block of it, and you can see right there it says contains no sulfur. So after frustrating with the clay, which is, it's so cold in this back part of my studio that the clay is really, and you can see my ceilings are quite high, and there's the big garage door, and that's my 300ZX, fully restored under the car cover, safe and sound from even the leaky roof up there. It gets cold in here and this gets very brittle. So what I did instead is take some trusty styrene and just cut it and use a little CA. This has got so much clay on it and stuff. I can literally scrape off this from the Lazy Susan. Now I can just pour the silicone in there. So there's the gobbledygook, and it's got some bubbles in it, stuff from the way I mix it. You've got about an hour working time with this stuff, with this blue catalyst, and it's still considered kind of a fast catalyst. But we don't really care how precise this mold is over here, as long as I can cast a solid body out of it and really make it nice, and then take much more care doing the other mold, although it's done exactly the same way. So what I'm going to do is take this gobbledygook, and one of the things you can do is, if you don't have a pressure pot or an air evacuator, is you can go way up high like this and then pour a thin stream onto the master. And what happens is, you see the lack of bubbles in there? Well, they're collapsing as it goes over this. And you're probably wondering, shouldn't I have put some mold release on this? No, you don't need mold release with silicone because it really doesn't stick to anything but itself. Now, I'm sure that this is not something you've seen in a slot car video before. I might be wrong, but I don't think many people have covered on video how you make a body. Well, for me, this is no different than making any kind of prop mold, or making a shape, or a submarine hull, or a sailboat hull, or a model aircraft hull, using silicone for the mold. There you can do it with hard molds too, with epoxy and resin, epoxy resin and fiberglass, which is another way to do molds. But you want something flexible like this. So you see, I'm not getting many bubbles, and most of all the bubbles are going to rise to the top. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and pour the rest of this on. So far it's not leaking out anywhere because the CA I used to glue down the styrene has sealed the edges. If it does, always keep some clay handy. Oh, I got to remember to watch the camera. And you see it slowly filling up. So we'll fill this all the way to the top. And I may not have enough silicone. I may have to mix up a little more, but I think I might make it. So we'll come back in a minute when this is all the way to the top. So there's a mold. Looks a bit like a boat, but once this hardens up, this will be a very flexible but firm material, firm enough to hold its shape. And I really don't need a mother mold around the outside of it. I think I have an example over here. I think it's over here in this mess. I really need to clean this studio up. It's been a busy year. Yes, this is slot car stuff here. And I did show you the Cooper, the T73. And I did the same process with that. And what I did is, I think this one is the finished mold, and this was the waste mold. And you can see they're just like a brick. And you see how brittle that is? That's because it's over catalyzed. I should show you. You see? Boom. Not in good shape, that mold. You see how much darker blue it is. It's over catalyzed. Whereas this one here, which is the production mold, it's fine. Same age. But this is the mold that I've been casting the bodies from. Bodies, there. This is the, let's see. This is the original master. And then I cast one out of the waste mold and made this one and scribed it with the panel lines on it and indicators where I think this is, yeah, it is. This is the one. This is the final master. And you're able, when it's made out of a solid material, you can see how the mouth looks there, or the opening, compared to the way it looks here. Because being that this is one solid material, and this is one solid material of this resin, I was able to shape it quite well. And this is one of the castings from the mold. It's got a bubble in it. Of course it has a bubble in it. That's why it's in here. But they come out very well. And then I have little molds here for the mirrors and stuff like that. So this is the master for vacuum forming over for the windshield. And so this body's a little bigger because the car actually was a little bigger. So that's as far as we're going to get on this until tomorrow when I open up the mold and we can take a look at it. Okay, here's my resin of choice. Take a good look, take a good freeze frame. It's 2-part 50/50, okay? TC 808, rigid urethane. And this stuff is white. It's very flexible. I mean, well, I wouldn't say very flexible, but it really approximates styrene. And so it impacts both for rocket nose cones and slot cars. It really does a good job. The other resins I've used are too brittle. What I use for a mold release also to facilitate lack of bubbles in your castings. If you put a coating of baby powder in here or cornstarch or any kind of powder, no matter what it is, you can see that it's kind of, you can see the coating. I just dumped it in there, blow it around, get the excess out, and you will not get a single bubble in your casting if you do this. So what I'm gonna do now is mix up 50/50 of this resin and pour it in here solid, and we'll pull out a part. Now there's not a lot to this. Basically all I do is mix the 2 parts together and pour it in. Hopefully I've made enough. I am gonna slosh it around a bit. Bang it a little bit, just to get any trapped air out of there. And then fill all the way up to the top. I did make enough. Oh man, exactly enough. Because I want the whole master. I want the this base that's on it too. So when I'm done tooling it and I go to make a mold for the production mold, it has the same support underneath it and the same pore hole. Now I'm hoping that this, no, it doesn't appear to be distorting it in any way, shape, or form, certainly not the body. So otherwise, if there was enough hydraulic pressure in there to actually force these 2 sides of the mold open wide and distort it, then you would have a mother mold built around this, either a plaster or you would do it with epoxy fiberglass, which is what I like to use. And that it becomes a supporting mother mold, but I don't think I need it on this. I certainly didn't need it on the other ones. We will open this after it sets up, which will be quite quickly. In fact, oh yeah, I stuck my finger in there. I can feel it getting hot. And if you're not familiar with this process, you might find this rather fascinating to watch. I don't know. It's going to go off here probably within the next 30 seconds to 60 seconds. You've got, with this particular resin, which is another reason I like it, a fair amount of working time. A lot of the other resins you pour in, you hope you get it all in the mold before it goes off. It goes that quickly. This one actually gives you time, especially if the room is cold, to rotate it inside your molds and then upend it, and it will pour out really even. You get a really even coating inside the body. And this is pretty much how I'm going to make my plug. I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to pour inside the plug some more silicone, and then remove the whole thing, and the plug will sit flat on top of here and fit down inside the mold and displace it so that I have hollow bodies, which is what we want. So it's getting, yeah, there it goes. It's getting thicker. This just gives you an idea. I mean, this is a lot of working time for a 2-part resin. I know a lot of you have resins you like to work with and you swear by them and everything. And sometimes you're afraid to try new things. I have been. When I tried this, I couldn't believe it. It just, look at the working time I got. So it's definitely going off now. And in fact, any second it's going to be not possible to move it anymore. But I had way over a minute worth of working time, which is wonderful. There we go. I don't want to do that again because I want to make sure it's really set up. Of course, whenever I shoot video, in this industrial complex I'm in with my unit, I get loud people with trucks. Never fails. There. Done. So that's how this stuff works. Now, after this thoroughly cools off, I will open it up and we'll take a look. So here we are. It's a little warm, but when it's really thick like this, it doesn't matter. You can open it up a little prematurely. It isn't going to matter. And of course, you can use both hands, which I'm not doing because I'm videoing. And I have a very expensive professional 4K camera, lavalier, fluid head tripod, and all that stuff, which is a big pain in the butt to set up to do videos on the fly, I found. So we shoot movies with it. So there we go. A couple little bubbles there. But, you know, I mean, it replicated that exactly. So now this is all one consistent material, and I can start scribing and punching this up, and then we make another mold, and it's already got the base on it so that we can easily have that opening, and that's how you do that. So let's start doing a little work on it. So what I've done now is using calipers to scale outline of the car, is I've marked where these indentations are, and I've got them fairly accurate to where they should be. And of course, you can use this technique to mark off every single panel line in the entire car, which I'm going to do, starting with these, because I never could get these quite indented the way I wanted to. The same thing goes for here. This could be a little bit more pronounced, but that's going to be easy because this is pretty much already marked for me, and I just need to sand that in a bit more, which will do really easily with this material. So I'm going to tape this off and take sandpaper to it. So what I've done is I've taken this file to it and gone right along the edge of this, all the way down, and got this nice indentation that should be there. Now what I'm going to do now is smooth it over with some sandpaper, and then go do the other side, remove the tape, and smooth it some more. So using a Dremel tool, going really slow and really easy, I'm duplicating the intake on the front, and I think it's really coming out really well. I'm very pleased with it so far. Not easy to do. You just have to have a steady hand. In fact, the whole car is getting smoothed out now. You can see clearly the difference between that and this. There's the original intake. This back here is not as well defined. In fact, the whole body is not as smooth. You just can't get it that way in foam and fiberglass. So once you get it out of this material, then you can start getting even indentations. Once I get all the right shapes in there, then I'm going to scribe it. Okay, so I am working on scribing the model, and I've done some scribes already, but the tape's covering it up. But what I do is I make a template sometimes, well, in the case of this one, which is actually, I can curve to fit this just so, and scribe against. But I also use it just to make a pencil line, and then I take blue painter's tape, and I take a rat tail file like this, and I very lightly scratch along this edge, and just get kind of a trench started that's true to this edge. I wish this thing would focus. There it goes. It's confused by my hand. So, and I do that, and then I get in here with other tools, and basically today I'm just using the edge of this file, which is very sharp on this edge here, once I established a decent groove with this one here. So, and then I scribe it all the way out, and I remove the tape. And I'll show you what that looks like when the tape's removed. So another thing I do is I stack up some layers of blue painter's tape, which really kind of helps guide the scribe initially when you go. Of course, if you use some thin styrene or thin metal, you can, this stuff is not thin enough, but you get the idea. And you curve it like that, you use that as an edge. That also works. So this is coming along pretty well. You can see how the scribe lines are showing up very well. And my neighbor's seeing. We got the cockpits pointed up pretty well, because basically there's going to be either a photo etched or a resin dashboard that goes in here. You can see it's very pointed up, very nice. The back's just fine. Most of the scribe lines are in right now. There's not a lot on this car, but what I do need is there's fuel tanks here. So I've made up this little styrene stencil made off of cutting out one of these and gluing it to the styrene and cutting it out. There's another one on top of the hood here, which is evident right here, and they're about the same shape and size. Perhaps a little, no, they actually are. This is curves down, so I can use the same template for that. There's some other things in here that I'm not quite, there's like a scoop. This one doesn't have the scoop. The scoop's here and there's no fuel tank. It's interesting that they change from year to year. There's fuel tank there. But there's nothing here, so I'm going to go with this version because it's really based on the plans that I have, although there's slight variations on all of them. Okay, we went from this, making a mold, to this, with all the scribing in it, the proper shapes. This is where the exhaust will go. It's different depending on what year Cooper was built. This is where the gas caps are kind of countersunk down into there. Most of the panel lines are all in it, but before I can get this to really make sense, I need to get primer on it so it's all one color. The mouth came out, or intake, came out very well. This is how it started out life. This is how it ended life. And it's very accurate all ways to the actual car. So let's put a bunch of primer on this and get it smooth. So already you can see what that does. Put the primer on it. Now it's looking really smooth. This is a fill primer, which is why I scribe so deep. So I can really lay a lot of primer on this and get a smooth surface. But boy, what a difference.